So, we are here today discussing the dynamics of being in-laws, and it's everybody's favorite topic, I'm sure. So, today is part 2. So, if you didn't get part 1, go back and watch that last week or listen to that last week. But today is going to be 7 tips on how to repair or build a better relationship with your in-laws. So, if that is something that you need more of, you're going to want to stay tuned because we've got some proven methods that have worked. We've tried them and they've tested out and are working. So we just wanted to share some of that because we don't feel like there's a lot of that out there. So I am Erica and I am your host of Powered by Joy podcast. And if you are someone who feels stuck, bored, frustrated with life, you feel like you just don't have the capability of making change in your life, we're looking at ways that you can bring in more joy, play, adventure, happiness, and feeling empowered, finding a way to feel empowered to make those changes in your life. We're talking about all sorts of topics around that on this podcast. So if that's something you're interested in, then you're in the right place, my friends. So this is Kylie, my daughter-in-law, and we were just saying it's been since 2011 that she's been in our lives, and that was the same year that I met my spouse, and so we've all been around each other for the same amount of time. And if you want to hear kind of the backstory, tune into last week's episode. So we're going to just dive right into the 7 tips. So I'm going to use my cheat sheet to make sure we don't miss any of them here. But the first one we wanted to talk about was how we invested in ourselves and learning and healing and just learning more about like our own personalities and what makes us tick. And one of the tools that I feel we found more recently was human design. And will you share a little bit about what human design is? She does human design readings and works to teach people about that. And so she'd be a better person to talk about it.
Human design it involves quite a few like ancient tools that have been around for a long time, including astrology, like Chinese I Ching, and your like chakras, energy centers, and it takes all of those things and makes a chart or a map of like your unique design and blueprint. And it goes off of your energy type, where there's 5 main energy types that are out there, and some are more rare than others, but that can affect your relationship dynamics quite a bit and how you go about making decisions for yourself personally and moving forward in the world, and how you can create more flow and ease in your life once you start working with that versus going against your own natural design. I'd say that's a pretty good summary without getting into too much
detail.
Yeah.
And funny thing is that you and Mitch share the same, I call it the fraction, but what is that? The profile.
Your profile, yeah.
Yeah. So you guys, my spouse and my daughter-in-law share the same those numbers, and that has been helpful for me because then sometimes when I'm like, I don't get that, she'll be like, well, this is how he's thinking. I'm like, okay, thank you. So that has actually been helpful. So I think doing things and finding tools, seek tools to like learn about yourself, and like how, and then also your partners, and then your in-law, your daughter-in-law, your the
people you interact with,
all your close family. It's worth like looking into some of this stuff because it really, I think, was a big turning point for all of us to go, that's so not personal. She's just, that's her wiring, and this is my wiring, and there's nothing wrong with either one of us. So another one you found was the Internal Family Systems book by Richard C. Schwartz, and we'll put that in the show notes if you want to check it out. And that one was helpful too.
Yeah, I liked that one because it's more of like a psychology approach. I tend to find stuff in like different areas because I feel like they all connect and kind of are necessary to learn, like your spiritual side, the mental, physical body, it all works together somehow, they all connect. And the internal family systems goes a lot into like your wounding and having your childhood self and your parent part, and how your parent part is your protector of your childhood wounding, and how when we're reacting to things and taking them personally or reacting from our wound, it comes from really just us trying to protect our child self. So when we can dive into looking at like where that wounding's coming from and how to help fulfill that need that we're trying to get met, then we can react more and respond instead of react from our whole self. And I think when you start looking at that, you can start advocating for yourself more and meeting your own needs versus, you know, trying to get them met through other people. That's really huge and gives you different perspective on how other people are reacting to you as well.
Yeah. Well, like I said, some of those content resources like she has and that book, we'll have them in the show notes for you. And then another one we talked about is like regular check-ins. So one thing that we were doing was like a regular dinners together. But I think specifically we were talking about how instead of waiting for things to fester or whatever, like having a lot of little talks along the way, where if like there was a story I referenced in the last episode where my son saw something and what I asked frustrated him, and so we talked about it quickly, and so it was not a big thing. There was no ongoing hurt feelings. He didn't start pulling away. He just said, hey, like when you say that, this is how I take it. Can you please just wait? You know, we'll ask you if we need the help.
Yeah.
So I think having those little talks and just doing it quickly, because that's a lot easier than a big talk where you're like, here's my laundry list of things that have hurt my feelings for the last
3
year.
hours later.
Yeah, and we've done that because we did let things just, and then there was slowly this separation, less time together, and then when you were hanging out, it wasn't as fun. It just, there was that tension there, and there wasn't that ease and laughter,
missing the connection, and a lot of hurt feelings and icky
and then
stuff.
Everything that comes out of the other person's mouth is just heard completely differently.
Skewed perspectives.
Totally. So so just not waiting to talk about stuff and trying to have little conversations, and even if they're uncomfortable, we just talked about like trying to, like, if the other person, like if she comes to me, trying to just hear and not defend myself or explain, but just hear and consider how that made them feel. And then it might be that, like, when Jason came to me, I said, oh, this is actually where my heart was and what I was thinking when those words came out of my mouth. I wasn't thinking that at all. And then he was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But still, I preferred if you just asked if we needed the help. So it was like, oh, okay, but it wasn't me defending myself. It was like, I did check my heart. I was like, was I not coming from the right place? Was I being that person who's inserting myself and not, you know, was I being insensitive? And like, so I was willing to hear him kind of reflect, think how I might have made them feel, like, ooh, okay. But then it was like, well, this is where I was coming from. I will try to be more sensitive in the future. So it isn't always easy to hear feedback or, you know, people saying, hey, but it's a lot easier to talk about it when it's small and not a whole bunch of stuff. And it's easier to hear with compassion and trying to come with an open heart when you know because you can't think it's ever easy for the other party. Their feelings are hurt and they need to talk to you. So if you're the person receiving that, you have to remember that if they're having that conversation with you, they care about the relationship enough to bring it up, and that they're probably just as uncomfortable as you are receiving it, and remembering that it's not easy for either of you, but that it's worth it to feel a little bit uncomfortable. You have to look at the mirror a little bit and like just continue to work towards it.
And I feel like you sometimes just take turns being the bigger person, you know, and reaching out first. And I think it's never the wrong move to be the person that reaches out first and taking that leap, you know, and being uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So we're just talking about regular check-ins, keeping the talks frequent, not being defensive, trying to get the other person's perspective, put yourself in their shoes, the old school rule of trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes when you're receiving information. The next one we talked about was being willing to ask for and receive feedback with
Yeah.
the purpose of growth and becoming closer.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it in the other one about how it builds trust more.
Yeah. And like going back to all this stuff, when you come in with an open heart, ready to receive that feedback and not react from your wounding, I think that's the best way to approach it and helps you stay on the same page too.
Yeah, and you have to remember that if you're wanting to change the dynamics in your family and you want to leave a better legacy than the one that you experienced and had handed down to you, that it takes work and it takes getting uncomfortable sometimes, and it takes feeling wrong or sad or upset, but you have to decide it's worth it to be willing to commit. Because we were just talking about in the other episode about how every time that we've had another conversation, it has built trust and safety for us to have the next conversation.
Yeah.
So at first it was very uncomfortable, felt very scary emotionally, like how's this gonna go? How are they gonna react? But as we've continued to do it, it's gotten easier because it feels safe, and we know the other person is just as committed to having the conversation. So just know that if you're the person starting to try to make some shifts in your relationship, that you just sometimes someone's got to go first, and just know that if you keep at the practice, oftentimes it will get easier and feel more safe as we go. And I'll leave it at that. So the next one we talked about was not venting.
To other family members, which we both talked about, we both done.
Yep.
And I mean, it's not gossip, drama, whatever you want to call it. It definitely, I mean, when you're doing it, you're probably feeling really hurt and like tender, and you just want to be heard, and the other person's not hearing
for
you.
your pain.
Yeah, exactly. But usually, like, if it comes back around to them or it gets misconstrued, and we all need to, like, vent and talk stuff out, but there's probably better ways to do that, or to reach out to, like, an outside person outside of the family, outside of those dynamics, or, like a mentor or a coach that you have in your life, therapist, whatever it is, so that they can, give you a positive perspective versus helping you stay stuck in like that victimhood.
Fueling the fire. And like we said, neither of us are coming from saying that we're perfect at that, but it is something that I think is more helpful to like try to go to that person sooner. But sometimes you do need to talk about something to process it, and there might be someone inside your family you talk to that is able to hear it and help you shift your perspective and help hold space for that pain that you're feeling, but they're not going to continue to create a divide. They're going to help you come back and show up to the relationship or the dynamic in a little bit easier version, or not so raw maybe. So just being thoughtful of like who you reach out to, if you
who you're venting to,
or who you reach out to if you are needing to do that, like I think it's important to just be thoughtful about that, and I know that I'm still work on that. It's not always easy. And then another one that is my favorite topic is playing together. So this would be the importance of play. We need to have laughter. We need to have fun, because if you think about any relationship, if that's not included, like, then there's not a lot to look forward to sometimes. And I think things can get stale, just like if you're in your own like marriage, like if you're not playing and going out and making memories together, what do you sit around and talk about? Like, so 10 years down the road, you can't sit and go, remember when we went and we were tubing last year and I got launched and whacked my bum on my sled so hard. It was so painful, but it was so funny.
That was bad.
So, but like, that gives us the opportunity to look back and have things to share and laugh about, and that's really what life is about. And that's why you want to work hard to have the relationship, is so that you have those people to turn to and go, hey, let's go play, let's go tubing, let's go play in the water, go down to the river, or and at the holidays, like I think we've like the thought of like we try to have games at a lot of our holidays, because I think we've all found that it's more fun than just sitting around talking and eating, is like actually playing some silly games. And we did like the hippo one where they were on the ground pulling each other. That was a fun one. That was super fun. A little chaotic, but it was super fun. So just being intentional. These last few are about intention, and one of them is is committing to being playful and like going and doing things besides just same old, I don't know.
And I mean, you don't want to stay stuck in the hard stuff, but I mean, you, like we're talking about, this whole point is to address that stuff so you can enjoy each other more and enjoy being present with one another.
When you are with each other, you're not like, when do we get to go home? When do we get out of here? You want it to be like, oh, that was fun. I'm glad we had the afternoon together. And like we, it wasn't that long ago that we got together, and we ended up randomly playing Foursquare with my dad, so great grandpa, us, you guys, and then the grandkids. And so there's 4 generations, and we were all just talking about, really started we had hung out earlier, but we just kept talking and we were having fun, and we just stayed and started playing. And then next thing you know, we're having a competitive game of Foursquare with 4 generations. It was like one of my most favorite recent memories that I'll cherish forever and have a video of it. And but those things don't happen when you're like looking at the clock because you want to get away from them because you're uncomfortable. That stuff doesn't just, you don't get those memories. And what are we even here for? If we're 80 and we look back and we're like, well, that sucked. Like, I want to go on my deathbed and be like, I have so many memories. I can't even think of them all because I have so many memories of being with you guys and the grandkids and the family. So I do think the play is just like, I can't suggest that enough.
And I think you do have to be just as intentional to make sure you carve out time for that stuff too, because it's easy to just keep busy with life and not make those moments happen.
Super easy.
And we were also talking about, when my kids, when those kids enter the picture, then you have less adult like one-on-one time too. So trying to find, even if it's just like twice a year or something, like those moments where like me and her can just have fun and playfulness together without like me feeling like I have to be responsible for my kids
not
running
having
around.
to be mom. And like we went on a scooter date with all
the ladies,
all the ladies in the family,
which was super fun.
It was so much fun for all of us to go and play together, and I wouldn't get to do those things if I wasn't in a dynamic where we've worked all together to have that. So it is the reward. It's the reward, but you have to be intentional about doing it, scheduling it, right? And so that kind of plays into the next one where we talked about being intentional with making time together, and not just being playful, but like we talked about like needing to have dinner so we all just know what's going on with each other and what's going on in our lives, and and just communicating a little bit better. We were not necessarily doing a good job of like keeping the communication open about scheduling things.
I would say like a couple years ago, if you would have like talked to us, we were all not good about communicating stuff, and so the time wasn't being created for us to like spend with each other and that thing. So we've had to work on that to get on the same page to build those memories. And so we were talking about being intentional with making that time together, and also what you want from that relationship, thinking about what do you want that relationship to feel like, sitting down, taking some time to be like, if things were feeling happy and healthy, like what would that look like day to day or week to week? What would their interaction be like? If I really had my dream scenario, would it be that we had a weekly dinner together where we play and have game night, and then we have one game night without kids once a month, whatever that is. But sit down and like think about it, and then go back and try to have that conversation to start working towards that and having more of it.
because it's not going to happen at all if you don't have the thought, communicate, and then actually schedule it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been something we've had to implement and work on. And then the last one that I had here was just as the mother-in-law, I had a big mind shift, I feel like, in this last year, maybe a little longer. But when you're the mother-in-law, I had all boys, and there's this protective, I viewed things through like a way of protecting and looking out for their best, or like advocating for his needs and what's best for him. And so that was kind of my mindset. And then I just felt this like, what would happen if I just like put all my effort into making my daughter-in-law feel loved and supported, and just pour everything into them and not be like, oh, what does he need? What is he not getting? If I just did that my son's gonna be happy if his wife is happy. And so, I think that was a big shift for me, in that it just changed my dynamic, or just how I thought, and brought more ease into it. So I would like to suggest that as a tip to mother-in-laws, is just like, can you love and pour into your daughter-in-law with the thought that that's the best way to take care and protect your son, because that's going to be the outcome. Usually it's not going to be 100% of the time, but like oftentimes if you're really putting your heart and soul into that, then it's going to just flow over onto your son. The benefits will flow to him, right? So that was the last tip that I wanted to share. Is there any other things that you can think of that would be little tips or suggestions for building that trust or repairing relationships?
I think we've touched on most of like the major ones that we use, and I think we're still growing and learning on what that looks like too. So it's always evolving and changing, and I think just being open to change and new things coming in, that can be hard for people to change and do things different because it's scary and you've never experienced it before. But a lot of times on the other side of like taking the leap of doing things differently, you just have a lot of good stuff come out of that.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in the last episode, so if you didn't catch that one, remembering that like there's cycles, and so even though we've worked on things and we're in a good spot, like more shifts will happen, more life events happen, births, deaths, whatever, and that each time the dynamic has to shift again, and we all have to readjust and figure out what our new needs need to be, and trying to be really open and compassionate to that we're all having that shift at the same time, and that like for us it's the first time because they're the oldest, and so we usually are practicing making those shifts and how that feels with them, so just trying to have that, like you said, open, compassionate, and just like going, okay, nothing's going to stay the same. So don't get attached and like, oh yeah, we're good. Like, don't ever sit on your laurels and think that like it's an active, it's definitely an active process that you have to keep working at. Sure. Well, if you have any other questions, if you didn't listen to the first episode in this two-part, I would definitely go back to there because we talked a little bit more in depth about the communication and things you could specifically really do showing up as in-laws for each other. And if you have needs for further resources, we have a lot of those that will be in the show notes. So we talked about human design, and we talked about that book, and there's lots of other good books out there. So if you need some more resources, we are happy to help with that. So you can just reach out through the contacts in our show notes. And I want to just thank you for joining us for another episode, and we'll see you soon. Just one more note I wanted to add to this episode is that if you are somebody who has situations where you're like, yeah, I wish I had someone to bounce off ideas of like how to address X, Y, or Z with my in-law, I want you to either message us directly, put it in the comments, or you could reach out if you actually wanted to run a situation by it and get the other side's perspective from daughter-in-law or mother-in-law, like just that other side. We just wanted to offer that out there. We'd be super curious to see what issues people have that come up that they might want some different perspective. And so we just wanted to throw that out there. So definitely reach out, check in the show notes for how to reach out to us if you have a question. So this is your opportunity to like ask your in-law without asking your in-law, right? Like, when do you get the chance to do that? Kind of get the other person's thinking to try to grasp where they're coming from so you're not frustrated. So I just want to invite you to take advantage of that. If you are someone who has stuff going on that you're like, I could use somebody's perspective on this. So check it out in the show notes.